looking for a what the fuck did I just watch kind of movie? Look no further, because you found one that not only depicts extreme anxiety, but forces you to feel it along with the main character. Buckle up, my anxious friends. Little side note, you can't convince me there isn't some Lynchian influence on this one. I'm Micah, a licensed therapist, and here we like to talk about horror and mental health. Anxiety is a chronic monster that plagues so many people, especially those with adverse childhood experiences, aka trauma. Beau and his story depicts anxiety in its purest form. If you're an overly logical person who maybe doesn't get anxiety, it's probably best to move along. I don't foresee you liking this one. This movie is a weird, anxiety-inducing ride. I believe it's supposed to give you those feelings, much like Mother. It's just a little stressful and frustrating for the viewer to watch someone get run over like the flattest of doormats. Meet Beau. Everything in Beau's world feels off. It's untrustworthy and surreal, much like many people with high anxiety. His anxiety presents itself in exaggerated ways, which makes very simple tasks extremely challenging. But he's not just an anxious person for no reason. We'll get there. First, the story. This whole story is very heavy in symbolism. The symbolism of this magnitude is really interesting to me because there can be so many different interpretations. I wanted to go with what feels right. Films like this, I think, want you to go with what feels right in your interpretation. So this is what the movie is about to me. So if you haven't picked up on this just yet, Beau is a man riddled with anxiety. And in this story, we open with a therapy session. The therapist slash psychiatrist is smiling. There's like this false sense of comfort, I think, that's supposed to be represented with this. This guy makes me uncomfortable. So Beau is discussing a reoccurring dream that he has, and this will come into play again later. Psychiatrist guy gives him a new medication and advises him that he has to drink it with water no matter what. In case you didn't know, most meds you have to drink with water. So we see a little more foreshadowing occurring when we see that the therapist psychiatrist guy has written the word guilt in his notes. Beau is very fearful of his environment, and this is shown when he just like books it home. Like in this scene, you see some unsavory characters hanging out outside of this apartment area, and then we just see Beau just because he is running to his door. In this environment, it's not necessarily an unwarranted reaction because someone does chase him up to the point that he gets to the door. Symbolically, I could see this as being the lens through which he sees the world, that it's threatening and unpleasant because that's how someone else wants him to see it. Beau has a real bad evening that turns into a real bad few days. He rushed home to his apartment, outrunning the unruly people out front, and passes a lot of interesting characters, including a corpse. It's just lying in the street. I don't know why. I wonder if this scene is also symbolic to show the lack of anyone giving a fuck about these people and their environment. Possibly to show that like no one is coming to save you or clean up any of these messes. And his interaction with a police officer later, I think kind of seals this. So poor Beau doesn't sleep well that evening. Someone keeps slipping notes under his door asking him to turn down the music like over and over again, and he's like not playing any music. Finally does get to sleep. He accidentally sleeps in because of the disruption throughout the night. He is supposed to catch a flight to go back to visit his mother on the occasion of the anniversary of his father's death. So he rushes around to get out the door and sits his luggage outside of the door, this key's in the lock, and then is like, oh crap, I need to go get floss. This is after we see him rushing around to get ready and debating like what he's going to take and what he's not going to take, and it seems like a really big task for him, which makes sense for someone who has intense anxiety and is like, oh shit, I'm late, oh no. So while you see him struggling to make some minor decisions, these are things that should be inconsequential, but in this story end up having dramatic consequences. Turns around and someone has taken his luggage and his keys out of the door. Like anxious person's worst nightmare. And that's kind of what just keeps happening. Shamefully, he calls his mother to report the bad news that he can't make it for the planned visit because he can't lock his apartment. You get the sense that while he's upset about not being able to make this trip, that maybe he's not going to be so mad not going. That he's more upset about what her reaction is going to be to the change. Maybe that's just me. She lays the guilt on thick for this one, and you can see how it impacts him. So he ends up taking this new medication that he is given. When he turns around to go get some water, he learns that his water is turned off in his building. Rookie mistake. From personal experience, it is always best to make sure that you have something to drink before you put the pills in your mouth. Like any anxious individual, he goes to the internet to see what happens if you take this medicine without water. In typical internet fashion, it says he's gonna die. Has to drink exactly 8 ounces of water or he's gonna die. Of course, he panics and runs out of the apartment, but he doesn't have his keys. So he props the door open to his apartment building with hopes of being able to slip out without alerting the people who are just crowded out front and getting across the street to a convenience store to get some water. So he slips out, runs across the street to the convenience store where one of the individuals again chases him up until the point where he gets in the door. This whole like running while somebody's after you reminds me of when I was a little kid and you would get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom and then you would be like, it's dark, the monsters are gonna get me, and you just jet back. Same feeling. So he rushes to grab a bottle of water and drink it and then walks to the counter to pay, where his card declines, which is not a fun experience. He's confused and he asks the person to run it again. He notices that the people outside have noticed that the door is open to his apartment. He sees them starting to enter his building. Of course, the panic then increases. So he's trying to dig out money to pay while the cashier is yelling at him that he's going to call the police because he stole. Beau finally pays for the bottle of water. He rushes back across the street and learns he has been locked out by the people who just invaded his apartment. Everybody just wanders directly into his apartment and chaos ensues. This part really gives me Mother vibes. Beau ends up spending the night on the fire escape outside of his apartment, just watching everybody fuck everything up. He wakes up to some construction worker drilling something above his head. It's like nobody gives a fuck about Beau's existence. Somebody had broken out the glass in front of his apartment, so he's able to go in, and he finds that it has been wrecked. Oh, by the way, when he enters his apartment, there's just some dead guy laying out in his doorway. Looks like he was trying to call 911. He has Beau's phone in his hand. Beau couldn't call anybody because his phone was in the apartment. So he picks up his phone, goes inside, kind of shoves the dead guy out of the way. Oh, I forgot to mention, there are brown recluse spiders in his apartment as well. It's just touching on all of the anxiety. So he calls his mom, but she doesn't answer. Some dude does. And there's an awkward conversation. He identifies himself as a UPS man. This is where he learns that his mother has died because a chandelier fell on her head and smashed it. So, of course, devastated. He doesn't know what to do. He ends up running some bath water and ends up getting in the bathtub. So he's trying to process this whole situation, clearly in shock, chilling in the bathtub, and looks up and there's just this dude hanging out on his ceiling, just holding himself up in this little crevice. So a spider crawls across dude and bites him because there's brown recluses in here, and the dude falls on him in the bathtub and they just start wrestling around. Beau's totally naked and there's this dude just like fighting him in the bathtub. It's like, what the hell? So Beau runs outside to seek help, naked. He runs into a police officer who's talking to someone who appears to be a sex worker, and the police officer responds to him like he is the threat and not the victim. So that's fun. He pulls out a gun and is threatening to shoot him. He has an item that he has purchased for his mother in his hand. Yeah, he purchases this little statue for his mom and writes some stuff on the bottom. So he drops this and then he's hit by a car. It's a bad day. Bad day. We learn later that he was also stabbed by a guy who likes to run around and stab people naked. Some serial killer. Beau wakes up in some teenage girl's room with a interesting couple taking care of him. They actually hit him in the car. They decided that they needed to take him home and take care of him since they hit him with their car. And I guess a hospital isn't a option in this version of reality. We do learn that the man is a surgeon, so I guess that makes it a little less weird. Throughout this part of the movie, I felt myself wanting to defend Beau. There's a lot of things happening that it's just like, what the fuck? So it continues to be an uncomfortable, wild mess. The family has a teenager who sucks. And the family also takes care of a very mentally unwell veteran who served with their deceased son. His name is Jeeves. He lives in a camper in their backyard. He is unruly. And there are some funny parts because of this dude. So, teenage girl is pretty awful to Beau when he didn't ask to be in this situation. And these people keep presenting various barriers to getting him to his mother's house because, remember, his mom has died and he's trying to get to her funeral. It's been 3 days. He ends up talking to an attorney on the phone who is handling his mother's estate, and this dude shames him for not being there, even though he was like literally stabbed and hit by a car. and unconscious for 3 days, and kind of kidnapped. I felt a lot of anger towards this situation and the people, and again, wanted to defend and protect poor Beau. So through the course of all of this insanity, there is a TV that tells him the future, sort of, and the future holds an attempt by the teenager to get Beau to drink paint to kill him because she is mad at him because she has decided that he is trying to take the place of her deceased brother. So he's like struggling with her, like, no, I'm not drinking this paint. So then she decides that she is going to drink the paint and kills herself from drinking the paint. He desperately tries to stop her, but doesn't work, and he is blamed for her death when the mother steps into the situation. Not knowing what to do, he just takes off into the woods. Little does he know that Jeeves, the mentally unwell veteran, is sent to track him down. So this is where he eventually meets up with this like traveling theater group that like does plays in the woods. So this part's really bizarre because of course the rest of the movie hasn't been. Watches it from the perspective of maybe him being the main character. It's a story about a man with a family and a farm, and there's a disaster and the family gets separated from him, and it seems like he just spends like the majority of the rest of his life trying to survive and find his family. Once the character is an old man, after a long difficult journey, he eventually meets back up with his sons. I wasn't much for this part. I mean, if someone wants to give me their ideas about the reasoning for this part, then go for it. Because the only thing I could come up with is that maybe Beau was reflecting on what his life could have been if he wasn't afraid of everything, including sex. Oh, by the way, he's afraid of sex because his mother says that his father died right at the point of orgasm the very first time they had sex, and that was when he was conceived. She has also told him that men generations back all died when they had sex throughout his family, therefore convincing him that he can't have sex because he will die. Anyway, we snap back to reality because Jeeves has tracked them down and starts killing everybody. Beau thinks he has met his real dad in this group at one point, which is wild because he believed his dad to be dead, of course. Maybe Beau's dad gets blown up, so there goes that. And I think this represents like some sense the search that Beau has in trying to figure out who he is and what he wants, but also still trying to fulfill this obligation to his mom. I don't know. So Beau runs again because he has to. And I imagine Jeeves killing everybody doesn't help Beau with his guilt since he led him there. Beau ends up hitchhiking back to his mom's house where he has missed a funeral. So in this part of this movie, he is kind of, he is reviewing things in the house. He's looking at pictures. He's reminiscing on his relationship with his mother. You see a lot of business related things on the wall that included him in the advertising. His mom was a very powerful and wealthy woman. We also learned that the doctor guy from the couple earlier, you know, the car that hit him, that he was one of her employees. Sees that on the wall. So was it a setup? I think so. So he ends up listening to the recording of the funeral where his mother is spoken very highly of. And he is absolutely trashed for choosing not to be there because getting robbed and harassed and hit by a car and stabbed by a naked guy while naked wasn't enough reason to be late. Oh, and he was essentially held captive. So this ongoing shame laid on him by others for not being more considerate of his wonderful mother is something that I could see a parallel to in real life. So people who can be quite abusive and manipulative can also be pretty charismatic. This is just some traits that they can have sometimes. And people who don't know them very well often think very highly of them because of this. But it's a trap. He observes his mother's headless body laid out in a casket in this house. And like, yeah, it's open casket. Her head's not there. That was a choice. So he notices something though. He notices a birthmark on her hand. That comes into play later. So sprinkled throughout this story is a historical relationship that Beau had with a girl when he was a young teenager, when he was traveling with his mother on a cruise ship. They promise each other that they are going to save their virginity for one another and are separated. He takes this experience super serious and genuinely waits for her. Guess who shows up at mom's house to pay her respects? This girl, all grown up. They have an awkward exchange and eventually decide they're gonna have sex. He is kind of freaking out and is like, oh no, stop, I'm gonna die. And then is super happy for a minute because he didn't die. But then she dies. and almost immediately appears to be in rigor mortis. She's like stuck in the position that she was in. So he freaks out and throws her body off of him, and some people walk in and just casually clean up the mess. No big deal. Just gonna move this naked dead body out of the way. And Mommy appears. Yes, his real mom. For a minute I was like, is this a hallucination? But no, it was her. And she enters the room to shame him and discuss his inability to come to her fake funeral. So then we have uncomfortable dialogue between him and his mother, who is fucking ruthless. Beau suspected that this was a thing because he noticed the birthmark on the hand and realized that that was his nanny, who is actually dead and headless in a box. They have this exchange talking about that whole situation. It's weird. And we learn that the therapist from the beginning is in cahoots with Mommy. So that's awesome. Spoiler, that's not how therapy is supposed to work. So it appears as if Beau's entire life is orchestrated by his mom and everything. Well, probably almost everything. It was like she was testing him. See, like, no matter what, you need to come to me, and when you don't, you will be punished. The fuck? As I stated in the beginning, Beau was in therapy discussing a dream that he had frequently. It was actually more of a flashback of a specific experience. And it seems like he has a twin brother who defies his mother and then forces the twin into the attic to never return. So this kind of really happened, I guess. I'm pretty sure it was metaphorical, like everything else. I think that the twin brother represented the part of Beau that may have had some defiance and pushed back against his mother, which his mother quickly shut down. During this conversation as an adult, Beau goes into the attic, and his mother closes him up in there. This is where he finds the part of himself that has been caged all this time. Or a twin brother who, I don't know, I still think is metaphorical. Oh, and there's a giant penis monster? Didn't expect that. He's told that this is his real father, the penis monster. This represented to me is maybe the tendency of a very toxic parent to demonize the other parent, again in an effort to control. The penis monster kills Jeeves because Jeeves is still pursuing him and breaks in. So there's that. That gets solved, I guess. And as we talked about, his mom definitely contributed to his isolation by lying to him about what happened with his father. She seriously impaired his ability to develop a meaningful relationship with someone else. She emotionally crippled him. Beau attempts to strangle her at one point, and she collapses. We suspect she may be dead. He regrets this, just freaking out. There's a lot of mixed feelings involved, and he runs from the house, jumping into a motorboat in a nearby body of water. And he travels and ends up in a very strange watery arena. And we conclude with a very stressful scene where Beau is isolated on this small boat in the middle of this arena filled with people, all of whom are judging his actions throughout this whole situation with his mother. It's kind of like a trial, and Beau doesn't get a happy ending. He doesn't ever get out. His feet are glued to the bottom of the boat, and he's just getting emotionally just hounded. He knows that the motor on the boat is malfunctioning, and the motor explodes, flips the boat over. I was really rooting for Beau at this point. The scene just pauses there with the boat capsized. So I watched until the very last credit, hoping he would come up, but he doesn't, and I hated that. If you haven't figured it out by now, the reason why Beau is afraid is because of the emotional abuse and heavy manipulation by good old mom. And side note, I think that this movie resonated with me more because I can relate a little. It is a bizarre experience to have such mixed feelings towards a parent. To feel obligated to them despite the anxiety and stress that you feel in their presence. There's like a push-pull, love-hate situation, and you know they make you feel bad, but there's some comfort in allowing them to have that control. You've been conditioned to accept this, and this whole experience really disrupts your own intuition and creates this lack of trust in yourself. Don't come at me with this, but it's your mom, you have to forgive them for abusive bullshit. No, you do not. You don't have to accept someone's crappy behavior towards you. You don't have to let it control you and consume you. In some ways, this story is cautionary, I think. You know, don't let someone else emotionally cripple you. Of course, as a child, you can't control what happens to you, but you can take steps to change it now. That's easier said than done. Talk to a therapist, not me, a different therapist. So I think that a lot of the confusion throughout the course of this story really reflects the confusion of a real life situation where a relationship is very toxic like this. Who can you trust? No one. You can't trust your parent, but you can. It's not to just dump on the mom. In real life, most situations, the parent is also dealing with their own mental health things and have experienced their own trauma. That's fine, but you can still do better. At its core, Beau is Afraid is about anxiety. Crippling, overwhelming, all-consuming, and it really shows how anxiety can warp reality. Guilt can be paralyzing, and how childhood trauma doesn't automatically leave us. The whole story captures the suffocating experience of constant dread, and shows how every decision can feel like life or death. If you have anxiety, you probably know what it's like to catastrophize at this level. It can get to a point where even the logical part of you realizes this is absurd. I want to hear what your thoughts are, because there's definitely some things open to interpretation with this movie.